Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for October 11th, 2024. Well, as it's Friday, I take questions from viewers, and I'm very happy to say that it appears that many of you are keyed in on the key strategic issues. And the questions were very good. There were lots of questions, but I'm going to focus on those that have the highest strategic importance. Namely, the fight to stop World War III and take power away from the oligarchy, which is hell-bent on continuing to pursue permanent warfare to preserve their status as a unipolar order. So I think it's important that we realize that the biggest problem we have is pessimism. And once you actually get a clear picture of where things stand internationally, and then realize what the International Peace Coalition initiated by Helga Zepp-LaRouche is doing, it will give you the confidence to go out and organize. So let me start with the questions that came in and the basic idea of how the people have to take the power out of the hands of the war hawks. The first question, and there were several people who asked this, what is the real reason behind the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East? Well, there are a couple of answers to that, but to take it in the order of priority, look, first of all, you have a military-industrial financial complex, which is convinced that the United States must be the sole superpower to protect what? To protect the financial power of those corporate cartels, the global reach, the ability to continue to control strategic metals and raw materials, to control credit policy for the world, to control the trade routes and the supply chains. That's in the hands of the military-industrial financial complex. And backdropping that is this idea of the U.S. as the sole superpower. Now, most people know that from the Committee for a New American Century, Project for a New American Century, the Wolfowitz neocon policy from the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. But it actually goes back further, and I want to give you a sense of one of the authors of the current strategic crisis, namely Zbigniew Brzezinski, who wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard in 1997, but it reflects his work over his entire career. Now, here's what he said. He's talking about how the U.S. is the first truly global superpower. And he writes, the defeat and collapse of the Soviet Union was the final step in the rapid ascendance of a Western Hemisphere power, the United States, as the sole and indeed the first truly global power. It is imperative, he continued, that no Eurasian challenger emerges capable of dominating Eurasia and thus also of challenging America. So his view is that we have to be prepared to sustain that status as the sole superpower, whether it's through war, assassination, unleashing the sanctions policies, and so on. Now, that's the reason why we're in a situation of permanent warfare. It's not about your security or the protection of the United States. It's about the protection of the benefits of the billionaires, of the most wealthy, the people who run the trusts and the BlackRocks and the Vanguards and the Archer Daniels Midland grain cartel. They're the ones who are determining the policy through their iron grip on the Congress and on the political parties in the United States. And for them, permanent war requires permanent surveillance, and we've had a surveillance state since 9/11, and also permanent censorship. You're not allowed to tell the truth. And if you start telling the truth, you'll find yourselves on a blacklist. So that's the reason for these wars. It has nothing to do with freedom and democracy of Ukraine or defending victimized Jewish people from crazed Islamic radicals. The crazed Islamic radicals of the jihadists, of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, were promoted by the same Brzezinski who said the U.S. must never give up its status as a sole superpower. So you look at the hoax that's been perpetrated and realize that's the cause of this fighting. That's why we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars to continue these wars when there's no U.S. national strategic interest involved. Now, the second set of questions, and I'll just go through the questions in order. Do they still believe Ukraine can win the war? Do they really believe Putin is bluffing? Do they really believe Russia will overrun Europe? Do they really believe the U.S. can win a nuclear war? Well, the answer to all of those is yes, 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 yes. They're delusional. They have a belief structure. Now, maybe some of them don't believe it, but they promote it because that's what will lead to the conclusion that therefore we have to support these wars. Do they still believe Ukraine can win? Any fool can see that Ukraine has lost, and the only goal of continuing the war is to tie up Russia and to kill off Ukrainians and open the land for the exploitation by BlackRock and Vanguard. Do they really believe Putin is bluffing? Well, they're saying his red line is a fraud, that Putin will not stand and defend Russia with nuclear weapons. Are you willing to take that chance? If you know something about Russian history, you know that at the point at which Russia's security and survival is threatened, the Russian people mobilize and fight. And to risk the lives of everyone on the planet to prove that the think tankers in the beltway of Washington, D.C. are accurate that Putin is bluffing, that's not a very good bet. Do they really think Russia will overrun Europe? That's absurd. And yet every single senior European Union official and NATO official says that day after day, because they say it because they need the money. They need to silence the opposition. There's no evidence that Russia has any intention of doing that. That's just a line to mobilize the von der Leyens and the others to send the funds to the military-industrial financial complex. As to whether they believe the U.S. can win a nuclear war, I urge people to watch the movie Dr. Strangelove, because Stanley Kubrick was operating from an understanding that there are utopians who are war hawks who are committed to the idea that they can use technology to suppress any opposition. And what you see in Dr. Strangelove is a Kissinger-type figure who essentially is willing to risk the entire population of the world for the sake of protecting their illusions. Now, the final set of questions starts with, can they be stopped? Can they be defeated? This is where I would call to your attention the very powerful and eloquent speech given by Julian Assange last week, when he essentially said that the fight is for accountability, and that the people who launch these wars turn it around. They try to say that Assange is guilty of doing things, of letting out the secrets, and thereby risking the people who are fighting to protect the existing order, instead of recognizing that what Assange and a good investigative journalist's job is to expose the corruption and the crimes of the most powerful. And so we are seeing now in the blogosphere, on the internet, more and more voices calling for accountability for the war hawks. Now, we also see that the U.S., through its policy, and by the U.S. I mean the Biden administration, through its policy of war and attempt to stop the global South from emerging, has actually unified most of the population of the world, the majority, against the war hawks and against the policies of the unipolar order. And we're seeing an emergence of blocks of nations that are willing to fight and stand up for their own sovereignty. This is something new. It's not new that it never happened before. It's new that it's now the global majority. And it's backed by Russia, by China, by India, by a growing number of nations in the global south, who will be meeting in Kazan, Russia on October 22nd to map out a strategy and a plan for breaking with the control and weaponization of the dollar and the dollar system. Now, can they succeed? Well, not on their own. But here's the important point. There's polarization in the West. There are a growing number of people in the Western nations, particularly throughout Europe and the United States, who recognize that this permanent war situation is not acceptable, and that there are more people beginning to recognize the danger of nuclear war. So the question is, what do you do about it? And this is where becoming knowledgeable is so important. The reason I do these daily reports is to give you a view of the world outside of the control of the mainstream media. But not just to tell you what happened, to give you the facts, but to give you a sense of the historic necessity of your taking seriously your role as a citizen. And ultimately, that's what will decide the fate of mankind. Don't leave it to the politicians. I know many of you are saying, well, if we elect Trump, we'll solve the problem. It didn't solve the problem last time because the citizens were perfectly willing to allow one person to take responsibility. Don't leave it up to Trump alone. We need an international mobilization of citizens, and that's what the International Peace Coalition is about. I'm putting the link in the description section today for you to join the call, the weekly Zoom call, on Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time in the United States. To join the call to hear from those leaders and officials who are beginning to move in a coordinated fashion to end the control of this sole superpower. So take it seriously, look at the links, and go out and organize and have fun doing it, because it's the only human thing to do. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.